Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. 'Tis the season for trades, so that's going to be the main focus of today's episode. We have a couple of news bits to get to, but then we're going to talk all about the top players who are most likely to get traded. So, going to be a lot of fun. I'm Trevor Lane. You can find me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane, joined by Keith Smith. Find him at Keith Smith NBA. Before we dive into anything, though, huge thank you, guys. Our subscriber numbers are going through the roof. If you haven't done so yet, please make sure you do subscribe. We're so appreciative of all the support that we've gotten. We're seeing real growth this month. Things are really taking off. And again, so appreciative of everybody who's been joining us and all of the kind words that we've been receiving in our comment section as well.
Yeah, big time. Very, very cool. Also noticed a little uptick in our reviews on the podcast side. So those are appreciated as well if you're a podcast listener. So thank you guys so much for all the support. It's absolutely incredible. And Trevor, I can hear a little bit more upbeat in your voice today. I'm guessing Austin Reeves has something to do with that.
Yeah,
man.
3 little letters, HBK, little sweet chin music. Yeah. Austin Reeves, and it was fortuitous because I happened to interview him the day before.
I saw that.
So now people are saying, oh, well, now you have to interview every Laker because clearly that's just the bit of magic that gets them to have a huge game. I said, hey, I'm not going to fight that. I will not fight. I think that's a great idea. But sure. But no, just a very cool moment and very cool for such a great kid to have an opportunity like that and to have that kind of, because that's the biggest moment of his career so far. That's probably the biggest moment of his basketball playing days. So to see somebody have that experience is always fun. And then, of course, when it's on your team, that makes it all the more exciting.
And what's wild is it was as great as it was, second best buzzer beater of the night. Did you see the Pelicans Thunder?
I saw
Pelicans. You saw it. Did you see what happened at the end of the game?
No, I saw Brandon Ingram dunk all over them, but
no. So we'll run through it very, very quickly here. So the Pelicans were up 110 to 107 with like 20 seconds left or something. I mean, maybe even less. It might have been like 10. And the Thunder inbound to SGA. They looked like the Pelicans tried to give the foul up 3, so he'd have to go to the free throw line. He throws it in from about 40 feet to tie the game. Pelicans have no timeouts. They inbound to, I think it was Devontae Graham. I hope I have that right. Devontae Graham proceeds to hit about an 80-footer to win the game from the backcourt.
I'm watching it right now. That's
bonkers.
No, he makes this shot?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Both shots, like 2 just wild shots that went in. So so that was a lot of fun. The best play of the night was probably Isaac Okoro dunking all over everyone.
Man.
That was pretty nasty. So yeah,
incredible stuff there. But yeah, I was lost in our post game show at that point when that happened. So I definitely missed that.
Yeah, I thought you might not have seen it yet, but yeah, that was absolutely crazy finishes last night. And this is why we love the game. It's so funny. I said to someone the other day, they were like, "Do you like it more when the Celtics play or when they don't play?" And I said, that's a good question. Sometimes when they don't, because then I can just bounce around and watch a whole bunch of different things and all that. Whereas when they play, I'm dialed into their game. But by the time they finally get back on the court tomorrow on Friday, it'll have been they haven't played for the last 3 days, including tonight. So it's by then I'll be ready for the game and to cover a game like normal and all that. But yeah, it's the NBA. It's fantastic, as they say.
Speaking of the Celtics, Danny Ainge now with the Utah Jazz. Shocker, right? That he's with the Utah Jazz. No surprise there that it's Utah. In fact, I think we talked about this. I believe it was last week that if he was going to go anywhere, it was probably going to wind up being Utah. But now taking over in kind of an advisory. I don't know what the exact title is, but he is in a role with the Utah Jazz, acting as somebody that they can kind of bounce ideas off of and that sort of thing. And I saw you respond on Twitter that now it's okay to laugh at the joke that they will be this close to getting something done. But yeah, Danny Ainge now joining the Utah Jazz.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It is a little interesting that it's not just as an advisor. Like he's gonna run the basketball ops, but he's not gonna have to do the full day-to-day stuff.
Right.
So like he's just gonna be. Sounds like it's basically Ryan Smith as the owner, then Danny Ainge in the power structure in the organization. So Ainge will have the final say on different things that they do. I also said that it'll be nice because now he can trade Donovan Mitchell to the Celtics, and because that's what former Celtics people do.
A Garnett situation.
I'll take it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so that'll be fun, and reunite him with his best buddy from the bubble, Jalen Brown. Now that's exactly how it should go. And then credit to the Jazz fans who are like, yeah, that'll be nice. Jalen Brown in Utah, we'll really appreciate that. Or if you took it as fine, that's fine. Give us Jason Tatum. So so just a little bit of fun there. But yeah, it's not unexpected. I think we knew Danny Ainge would get back at this eventually. I mean, this is what he does. So it's now he's doing it at home. He had moved back to Utah within weeks of stepping down from leading the Celtics basketball ops. So not at all a surprise that he's going to be running the Jazz. Maybe the surprise comes in just that he's really running things on the basketball side. That maybe is a little bit of a surprise, but
I mean, he's overseeing things, but he still has a general manager. He still has, he's got he's involved, but my sense is he's also not. It's not like he's running everything because he wants to. I mean, health wise, like you don't want him to be taking on the stress of the every single day. Yep. And so I like that he's got that kind of authority, but at the same time, it feels like he's got the ability to step back as well.
Exactly. Like I don't think he's going to be making a ton of scouting trips and things like that, but I think it'll probably be more and more colleges are doing the deal where they swing through Las Vegas and play like a set of games there. So my guess is the Salt Lake City trip to Las Vegas is actually a pretty short one. So my guess is he makes that trip. Probably can hit up some of the schools out there on the West Coast fairly easily from Salt Lake City. So yeah, that'll be what it is. I just think the daily grind that's not going to be a thing for him.
Then we've got the Pacers make a move, sign a player two-way contract, Terry Taylor. So just transaction-wise, that's something that happened. I mean, not a major noteworthy event or anything like that, but something that the Pacers did do.
Yeah, Terry Taylor's been playing great in the G League. He was with the Pacers in training camp. They're making a little bit of a different move. They need a little bit more size. They feel as though they've got their backcourt covered. So DeJon Jarreau was the two-way player that they waived. You'll start seeing two-way moves start happening now. G League season's well underway. Guys who teams don't want to lose to another team on a two-way or lose on a 10-day or just a full call-up. They'll start making their moves there, and the two-ways were less than a month till those need to all be locked in, and you can't make any more two-way adjustments. So we'll start to see those start happening here probably in greater numbers, especially as we come out of the G League Showcase, which is going to take place next week.
All right, so let's get on to our trades. We're going to talk about, we each picked, we were going to pick 5 players that were most likely to get traded, and knowing that our lists would probably have some crossovers, we each did more than 5. Keith apparently did like 35. I think I've got like 8 roughly or something on my list. So Keith, why don't we just start off with Jalen Brown, right? That's the go-to, right?
Yeah, no doubt. No, Jalen Brown's not on my list. If he's on your list, we can have a whole different conversation.
No. I saw what you put out on Twitter, though, that you checked around on a potential Jalen Brown trade.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of stuff out there about Jalen Brown. We talk about this real quick. Just different places saying, it's Boston's ready to split him and Jason Tatum up, and Brown's the one who's more likely to go than Tatum, and all these things out there. But when you read all those quotes, it's really kind of interesting where they're coming from. And so I was asking a bunch of people, hey, what have you heard? And one front office executive from another team, it's not Boston, summed it up pretty good to me. And he said, look at where all those quotes are coming from. They're coming from other teams. They're not coming from Boston. He goes, that says to me, everybody wants to trade for Jalen Brown, but the Celtics probably don't really have any desire to move him. And that's been my feeling all along. I think it's, as we always say, consider the source. Where does the news come from? And, where is that? So, we'll see, where this goes. One other thing, just, Well, you know what? We'll get into it because he may be on our list here of players we think might get traded. But can I make a rule?
Sure.
No Ben Simmons. It's too
He's
easy.
the top of my list, but I knew we were probably going to eliminate him.
Yeah, so too easy. So we'll take him off the list. Just and we're Lord knows we could have just called this the NBA Ben Simmons show
Right,
for
yeah.
a while there. So we'll take him out and spare everybody that one, and let's go. You go first.
Okay.
You lead us off.
And maybe this is an obvious one just to kick things off, but I'm going with Myles Turner. It feels like at this point he's been in trade rumors for ever. Basically, every single year we've been hearing Myles Turner trade rumors. You've got the little verbal spat with the Pacers, and then you throw in that the Pacers are now willing to apparently enter a quasi rebuild. They're willing to go down that path. It seems like the writing is on the wall for Myles Turner to get moved. I know there's a lot of talk about Domantas Sabonis, but if I'm the Pacers, that's not the guy I'm moving. Yes, he will get the most interest, but if I have to pick between the two, I'm sending out Myles Turner, and I think there will be enough interest in him, particularly as we get closer to the trade deadline, for him to be moved. Where he winds up, I don't know, but I do think that at this point, Myles Turner's days in Indiana are limited.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting because what I put on my list was what we heard I believe it was Shams who had the initial reporting of Turner or Sabonis. So I kind of put them together as a package of or, because I do think one of the two gets moved. I just think, now I've been saying this since we started recording this show that it's time to break those two up, and it clearly didn't happen. But what I was going to add a little earlier, which I thought was really interesting, was we had two reports, Kevin O'Connor and Matt Moore. So Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer, Matt Moore from the Action Network, both said Sabonis wants out of Indiana. With that, Kevin O'Connor was he straight wants out. He does. And then Matt Moore's was, I was told, it's not just this season, but going back to last year, Sabonis was looking for a change of scenery. Scott Agnes, who covers the Pacers and has for years, says that's false. So who knows? Well, we'll see. We got a little source off going on there with that one. But yes, I'll take your agreement, or I'll take your agreement. I will agree with you on Turner, and I will add Sabonis kind of is the or, because I do think one of the two goes.
If you're the Pacers, though, and you're sitting back and you're thinking, okay, we're going to rebuild, whatever it is that you want to call it, whether they're going to try to stay good or good enough to get into the playoffs or whatever, we can go down that path later. But right now, if I'm the Pacers and I'm looking at this situation, I'm keeping Sabonis. I'm doing what I can because that's your piece that you're going to build around moving forward. What I don't want to do if I'm the Pacers is just say completely blow it up, trade everybody, unless you have some really incredible offers out there. Like we talk about what the Magic got for Vucevic. Sure, you had a great offer, and so you take it, and so you do the full rebuild thing. I don't know if the Pacers want to go down quite that route. And that is kind of evidenced by the Turner or Sabonis. And if I have to pick one of the two of them, I will take a lesser package for Turner rather than trade Sabonis and maybe get a little bit more back, because I think Sabonis is that much more valuable.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you and I are in agreement there, but I think we might be in the minority for a lot of other people around the league. I think a lot of people see Turner as the more valuable because what I think they see out of that is he's more plug and play. You can basically fit him in anywhere, right? Because he's a stretch big who can block shots. Like that's kind of what a lot of teams want at the 5 position, whereas Sabonis is a little bit more, you got to put him in and you're going to have to build a system around him on both ends, an offense that highlights his strengths and then a defense that covers for his weaknesses. So I think that part gets a little bit more difficult, but I just think Sabonis is the better player of the two. So I would rather stick with Sabonis if it was me. But yeah, I do think, that is interesting. And I think in some ways though, Turner being more plug and play for more teams gives you a wider trade market. Cause I think there might be fewer teams. So I think he's probably slightly more, going to be the one who goes than Sabonis. And I think Sabonis is one of those guys then, cause we're in full agreement. Indiana's not blowing this up and rebuilding. It's not going to be get rid of everybody and start over. They're looking at, we'll still have Brogdon because, again, Malcolm Brogdon can't be traded this year before the deadline. So they'll at least have him and Sabonis plus whatever they get. Maybe TJ Warren comes back, and now we're rebuilding along with Chris Duarte, their prize rookie, and you just kind of go from there. I'm going to stick with the top of my list. I'm going to stick right there in Indiana. I think Karis LeVert goes.
Yeah.
I think they have now seen what they needed to see out of Karis LeVert, and I think they would rather have the ball in the hands of Brogdon, Sabonis, Warren when he gets back, and Duarte versus the kind of eat up possessions, high usage play of Karis LeVert. Yeah. And I like Karis LeVert. I just don't necessarily think that's a great fit for that Pacers team just because of the way he plays. It's almost a little bit like Victor Oladipo when he was at the height of his ability for Indiana. And I think they've seen their other players grow enough that you don't need that kind of guy necessarily eating up all the possessions. So I do think we're going to see Karis LeVert get moved.
I agree, and I think that you could see in terms of his market, you could see a number of contending teams talk themselves into, this guy is the bench scorer that we need to come in. This is the guy who can come in and give us a big boost with our reserve unit. I think that he's got the talent certainly to be a starter, but there's enough teams out there to widen the market because contenders aren't going to look at him and say, this is a guy that has to start, but he could be a nice complementary piece for them. But you could also get some of the mid-tier teams interested who might use him in a starting role as well. And at $17.5 million, I think that's a low enough salary to where teams are going to be able to get there money-wise. So I think he will have a pretty wide market. So I agree. I think he gets moved.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's keep moving. Let's
do it. And so just to kind of explain kind of what we look at in these situations, we're trying to look for players in situations that just don't really fit. That's where you tend to see trades happen. When you find a player who, an aging player on a rebuilding team, a young player on a contending team, things like that, that's usually the recipe for a trade. And then you have a lot of other factors in. Where's the team at in the standings? Where's what's the player's situation contractually? There's lots of other things.
Yep. Is the contract movable? That's always a big one. Yep.
And so that's what we're looking at. When Keith and I are going through and we're looking at who's likely to be traded, those are the factors that we look at. And one of the guys that jumps off the page to me when I am looking at things like that, it's Derrick Favors with the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Oh, wow. Hey, not on my list.
Not on your list. Okay. He is not a great fit. Maybe a buyout candidate, potentially. But this is a guy who I think does get moved. I think there's enough teams who could probably use somebody as we see injuries start to mount and things like that as we get closer to the trade deadline. And I think the Thunder will be very motivated to trade him because what's he doing on a rebuilding team like the Thunder anyway? They're going to get to try to recoup any value they can for him. So if there's a trade out there for him, I think the Thunder will gladly pull the trigger.
Yeah, I think that's one where OKC's side of it, no doubt, they would move on from him without a question. I think it becomes that $10.2 million player option for next year. That's a little bit of the challenge. But if you're looking at it and saying, hey, we need a big to push us over the top, that's not a number that's going to scare you off if you're a team that can get to that number fairly easily for 9.7 this year. Then the 10.2, you kind of say, all right, we'll bring him in, see where it goes. If he really pushes us into contention for something good, then you really don't care about paying the 10.2 next year, or we'll just deal with it next season. That's not such a big number. We can't get off it. There's if the trade rules didn't exist on reacquiring players, you could just call back OKC and say, hey, you want him back? Right. Because they're probably willing to do that if you'll throw him a pick. But yeah, that's an interesting one. I did not have him on my list. I'm going to go to a different veteran big man. Okay. I'm guessing he may pop up on your list because I'm not exactly going crazy here, but Thaddeus Young.
He is the next player on my list.
Yeah, this one it's the only hesitation I have is the Spurs just don't do in-season trades. Right. But I think this may be one where the Spurs kind of break that track record because someone is going to offer them something decent, whether it's a top 20 protected first-round pick, 2 good second-round picks, a young player who needs a change of scenery, some team that needs a front court player that's trying to lift themselves into the postseason is going to, I think, offer the Spurs enough to make it worth jumping at this versus just buying him out. 100%, he will not be on the Spurs by the end of February. If he's not traded by the trade deadline, he'll get bought out. He's not playing there. There's no role for him from the Spurs side, really, or that young side. But when he has played, he showed he still has the ability to help a team. So I think he gets moved at some point.
Agreed. Yeah, Thad Young definitely on my list, and somebody that where it just makes too much sense for him to not get traded. All right. Yep. Another thing that we look at is where is there pressure for a move to be made, right? That's what we're going to look at. Where's there a lot of buzz? Where's there this push for something to happen? And you look at a place that really needs something to happen, and that is Portland. So I'm going to say CJ McCollum finally gets moved. Again, this is something we've been hearing about for years, but Portland is starting to really feel the heat. We've been hearing all these different rumors. Damian Lillard might push back against some of them every now and then, but there's no question that Portland would like to contend. CJ McCollum, we did get some positive news health-wise in terms of his collapsed lung is getting a bit better. Yep. I think he's a very talented player. I think he's got value around the NBA. Is it enough? That's the question mark. Is there enough value around the NBA for Portland to say, yes, this piece that we're getting is going to be the thing that's going to push us over the top? But I think they're getting to the point where they have to do something, where inactivity is not going to cut it anymore. And so I do see CJ McCollum getting moved.
Yeah, I like that one. I cheated and just wrote Portland.
Portland.
Just Portland.
Everybody on Portland.
That's it. You have to turn the whole city away. But yeah, no, I think I feel really confident saying Dame's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe this summer if things really go sideways and he decides he wants out, but not at the deadline. Norman Powell, I feel really confident is not going anywhere because he's got the long-term contract. But Robert Covington, Yusuf Nurkic, I think both of those guys, very tradable, $12 million for Nurkic, $12.9 million for Covington, both expiring contracts. And then, yeah, I think McCollum is a good call. I still wonder if CJ McCollum is involved in a Ben Simmons trade that gets Simmons to Portland, but CJ doesn't necessarily go to Philly. Maybe there's a third team in there that's where Philly gets their assets from that they're looking for. So I do kind of wonder about that. I think Larry Nance, very tradable, 10.7 this year, 9.7 next year. That's a deal that could get moved. So I just think Portland's going to do something. New interim general manager, by all accounts, has the green light to make moves and trades and everything else. A lot of people think that may be his job there. So if they're going to let him do that, you might as well take advantage and start moving pieces.
Well, and that's actually important because most of the time when you look at interim GM and you say, okay, well, this guy, he probably doesn't have the authority to make a big move because they don't know if he's going to be the guy moving forward and all that. But if they're telling him, go ahead, right? We give you permission to make this big move, then you kind of need to make a big move to prove yourself, right? This is your chance. This is why a lot of times when you're working for a company and new boss comes in, new ownership, there's all those changes because they have to be able to show, look, this is what I did. This is why I was worth bringing in. We might see a similar situation in Portland where now it's become more likely that a move gets made because this new guy's coming in and has that interim title right now and needs to prove himself.
Yeah, and I don't think trading Cody Zeller on his minimum salary to a team that needs a big cuts it, right?
No.
I'm with you. I couldn't decide who I wanted to pick. That's why I wrote the whole the whole team down. So, all right, my next one, I think Tomas Satoransky gets moved by the Pelicans. $10 million expiring salary. Doesn't really have a full need there for him. This one changed is maybe a little bit with the injury to Kira Lewis because maybe they ball handler around on that side. But I just think this is a guy who you could see them move on from because he's probably not going to be back there next year. He's kind of struggled to fit in there the way I think that they would like it, or they maybe envisioned him when they did that trade. So yeah, I think that there's a chance, some team throws, again, this is not going to be a big return. This is probably like 2 second-round picks or something like that, or maybe a young player who really needs a change of scenery. And they won last night on the buzzer beater. They've been playing a little bit better, but Zion's not coming back anytime soon. This team's probably not really going anywhere. I think this is the kind of get rid of the vet move that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about teams that get pushed from into one position or another, either buyer or seller. Heading into the season, we may have said the Pelicans would wind up being a buyer because they were going to try to make a push this year. Now, I feel like as time goes, with each passing day, they become closer and closer to being a seller. Right now, 15 games back in the Western Conference, currently sitting in second to last place behind, or just in front of the Thunder, who are organizationally are not trying to win. So the Pelicans are in rough shape right now. I mean, the Houston Rockets right now are ahead of the Pelicans. So yeah, I think they're going to be pushed into seller mode, and Satoransky makes a lot of sense there.
Yeah, I think it would be different if it was Zion's coming back, because I think you could say, "Oh, we started to play a little bit better. We can maybe get into that play in and then make a run there." But yeah, if Zion's not going to be back till at this point, I feel really confident saying until well into the new year, maybe February-ish. There's a lot of people who think he doesn't come back at all this season. So let's see where that goes. But that's a conversation we can have on another day.
So, Keith, this next one, there's a couple more that I think are very obvious, but I'm going to save those ones right now. And I'm going to go to one that I think is really interesting and kind of difficult because of the contract, and that's Eric Gordon. Eric Gordon with the Rockets.
You're going to go to Russell Westbrook.
No, I'm going to Eric Gordon, Russell Westbrook.
I had Eric Gordon on my list.
Okay, so here's my thing. So contractually, $18.2 million this season, $19.5 million next season. Not fully guaranteed, but $20.9 million the following season. Like you're committing some real money here to Eric Gordon. You've got to be convinced that this is the guy. And I don't know if you can say that he is. I mean, if you're a team right now and you're looking for shooting, certainly Eric Gordon is one of the better options out there. But could you find somebody that costs a lot less than what he does? Probably. And so, and at 30, he's going on 33. He's going to be 33 here on Christmas. I don't know if I want to be the team paying him next year or potentially the season after that. However, he's shooting 45% from three right now. Like, he's incredible in terms of his efficiency at the moment. Now, is that sustainable? Probably not, but he's still probably the best shooter that's out there on the market, unless, of course, the Nets go ahead and they do move Joe Harris. So I'm torn in terms of what the Rockets get for Eric Gordon, what the interest is around him. I know they're going to be a motivated seller. He's playing great in terms of his shooting efficiency. Teams are going to be interested in that. But the contract is the only thing holding me back from saying this is a full go, 100% he gets moved.
Yeah, if you felt good that he was going to be healthy all the way into a playoff run that you hope goes into May or June, if you're a contender, you'd grab him without even thinking about it and you'd move on because of the production. He's also not just a shooter, right? Like, he's a guy who can do some scoring off the dribble, can get to the basket a little bit, so that also helps his overall profile. But yeah, you're right. It's the contract. In the way that final year is structured, this is where it becomes kind of interesting if you're the opposing team. So it's fully non-guaranteed at $20.9 million. So you can effectively be out of it for nothing unless Gordon makes the all-star team this year or next year. Well, that's not going to happen. Right. I feel very confident in that. Or the team he is on wins the championship in 22 or 23. If you're a contender, you're right. You're presumably acquiring him to go win a championship.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then if you do, now we got to pay him $20.9 million when he's 35 years old. So that becomes a little bit more of a, where are we at with this? So yeah, that is, that's just something you have to factor in. But again, if you're winning a championship, you do all sorts of things that you can, write off. Cause at that point, a lot of times fans are like, hey, whatever, I don't care, pay him whatever. It doesn't matter. So yeah, I had Eric Gordon on my list. I'll add another Rocket if I can. Daniel Tice.
Oh, good one.
That contract was always set up to be pretty tradable. Even we've talked about it before, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. But it was a weird signing to begin with. He's now more or less out of the rotation when they're healthy. So yeah, I think there's a good chance he gets moved. And there's three things contenders are always looking for at the trade deadline: bigs, shooting, and backup point guards. always there's always a home for those three somewhere by the time you get to the deadline. Sometimes it's an injury happens that opens up that need, or just the team is like, yeah, we like this. So I think that I think the Rockets are in a spot where they could maybe, I would have said a year ago, they're gonna have to pay to get off the Eric Gordon contract.
Yeah.
Now I think you might get, it's not gonna be a great return, more because of that extra year next year that's on there. And the same thing with Tice. You're not getting any kind of crazy, incredible return, but maybe again a couple second round picks, something like that could maybe help you along a little bit.
Moving on to another one of the obvious ones, I think, Marvin Bagley. Please,
Yep.
for all of us,
Yeah.
just move on. It's time to get this done. It's time for Marvin Bagley to be on the move. That's going to be what's best for him. That's probably going to be what's best for the Sacramento Kings. I mean, we can go back and relitigate the draft and everything like that and talk about who they should have picked and everything. But
Sure.
Bottom line is they didn't. Things have not worked out in Sacramento, and I think it's going to be best for all parties involved to part ways. And I think that there are teams out there that would take a chance on him in kind of a second draft-ish scenario where you say, okay, he's still young enough. Maybe he just needs a change of scenery. There's teams that'll be interested. So Marvin Bagley, I think, should be on the move.
Yeah, if you're any one of those rebuilding teams, why not? Right? It's not certainly not going to cost you anything. You might as well make that happen. So yeah, I had him on my list. Speaking of rebuilding teams, and a shooter that may cost less than Eric Gordon, Terrence Ross. I think the Magic are going to move on from him. I think it is interesting that there's some reporting out there that they want at least a first round pick and maybe two. Well, that's not happening. He's not that impactful of a player. There's also not going to be teams that have that big of a need for Terrence Ross, but that could be one where maybe you could convince a team to give you a top 20 protected first or something like that. If they really are like, all right, we can do that because this is a top 8-9 rotation player for us moving forward. But again, this might be one of those returns similar to Evan Fournier, where it's a couple, second round picks or something along those lines. A very easily movable deal. Like Gordon, he does have 2 years fully guaranteed left, 12.5 this year, then 11.5 next year. But it's just enough less money that I don't think anybody's really gonna blink at taking that kind of salary on.
Yeah. Yep, that's a good one as well. I'll go right back to Sacramento and say Buddy Hield. I mean, they already had him traded this last offseason. He thought he had been traded and that he was a Laker. And then it didn't wind up happening at the last minute. The Russell Westbrook thing went down instead. I think there's another one where writing is on the wall in Sacramento. Buddy Hield, I would imagine, will be moved by the trade deadline.
Yep, I'll go back to Orlando. Robin Lopez.
Good one.
$5 million expiring contract. I think that is a big man who can play. Can really, still do some stuff defensively. Offensively, he's a good screener. He's a pretty good passer. He's somebody you can occasionally throw the ball into in the post on second units and let him do some work. So it was kind of weird, but that one may be one where he's like, I don't really want to go anywhere. He very much wanted to and still wants to be here in Orlando. Big Disney guy, actually lives on property at Walt Disney World. So I think that is maybe that factors in, and they don't really want to move him. And I know they love the work he's been doing with Wendell Carter Jr. and Mo Bamba, the team's young bigs. So they maybe the Magic don't have a lot of interest, but that could change if, some teams like, man, we really need a big man, because at $5 million, that's something every team can get to fairly easily.
Keith, obviously we could talk trades all day, but let's wrap here by talking about some of the major markets that haven't really been mentioned yet,
Sure.
including ours. And I also want to get to Golden State, but let's start with New York. The Knicks, they're kind of, we talked about how teams that are put in a position where there's some pressure to do something. Is there a move here for them to make? Because we didn't have any of their players pop up, but it feels like they're a team that would be motivated to get something done.
Yeah, I think so a couple things going on with the Knicks is, one, right, they've really slid in the standings recently, and that they're like so many other teams. Yeah, and so many other teams, they're starting to go through COVID issues. They've got a handful of guys out right now. So they're 8 games out of first, but they're only 3 games out of 6th in the last playoff spot. So it's I still want to think they would go the other way first, where it
Be a
would be
buyer.
they'd be a buyer
Hmm.
versus a seller. But all their contracts are set up to be movable. They kind of created a 2-year window for themselves here with all these deals, and then team options, true team options for most of the guys that they signed in the summer of 2023. So yeah, I tend to think they'd be more on the buyer side because I just don't think they see themselves as, hey, let's start selling off. Because if you are going to sell, you're not going to get all that much for any of the guys that they'd be selling. I mean, maybe some team like Nerlens Noel, somebody maybe wants Derrick Rose, but I just don't think you're getting a ton of interest in those guys.
Do they move Kemba Walker? Almost,
I
I mean,
think they'd like to.
but not expecting even to get a huge return, just to kind of
Maybe.
do him a solid at this point.
Yeah, maybe if a team comes up with a need for either a veteran starter who can
Mhm.
come in at the point guard spot, or somebody to just at that point you can kind of watch bounce around, bounce around on a second unit and
Sure.
kind of captain your group off the bench, maybe. But yeah, I don't know. I personally I think they were they were playing okay with him in the starting lineup and felt like they made a change to make a change's sake. Even though they were winning games, and now that he's not playing, they haven't been winning games. So I don't know. Maybe they're the ones who actually give him a shot out there.
Well, your team, the Celtics, and we know Jalen Brown is not getting moved, or most likely, I guess never say never in the NBA. All it takes is one phone call, but it would seem unlikely that he's a player that gets moved. But Dennis
Mm-hmm.
Schroeder, I mean, it makes a lot of sense for them to move him, but he can also
Mm-hmm.
help them right now. If the return isn't good enough, they can just say, no, there's more value in just keeping him for the remainder of the season than what we'd be getting back in
Yeah.
trade. Do you see them making a move?
You think this is one where it'll come down to where are they sitting on February 10th on trade deadline day? If they've gotten through this really rough December schedule over the next month and a half here, and they're feeling really good that what, where we get through that, we're in this thing where it look like we can maybe make some noise in the playoffs. You just keep them and let it play out and see where it goes. If you're not in that position and you're kind of sitting there like, yeah, it's is it going to change anything for us materially if we trade him? Then I think you do look. It's, again, you're not getting back a massive return package. What you would kind of be hoping for, which feels a little gross, is that somebody has a major injury at the point guard position, and then you can be like, hey, 5.9 million. What do you think? Pretty easy. Give us something good, and then off you go with that. But so I think he is the most likely Celtic to be traded.
Yeah.
I just don't know that he gets traded. I'll say the other two guys on my list for Boston that I think are more likely, and I'm gonna have a piece coming on Celtics blog hopefully later today that really goes in depth on this stuff, is Juancho Hernangomez, just because he's a de facto expiring deal,
Makes
and I
sense.
think that becomes the tax avoidance move if they can pull it off. And I think Josh Richardson, I think, is a guy who could get moved if a team is looking for some wing help and the Celtics are like, hey, we can kind of do this. But again, that move would have to come if we're pivoting towards we want to get more experience for our young players off the bench.
Right. Yep. That makes sense. To talk to my team, the Lakers, I mean, they've got a lot of guys on veteran minimums. Those guys would just be throw-ins in a deal. Really, it comes down to Taylor Horton-Tucker. That's the piece they would have to put in just about any move that they were going to make. I know people have talked, Russell Westbrook, but it's pretty unlikely that happens given the size of his salary. Again, we've seen contracts in the NBA where we've said this is untradeable and then it winds up getting traded. So I'm not going to say there's no chance, but I'd say it's very unlikely that he gets traded. But Taylor Horton-Tucker is the piece to watch. That's a guy that could potentially get moved. And like I said, let's say they want to go get Myles Turner or something like that, and the Pacers really want something back in return, like Taylor Horton-Tucker would have to be in it logistically just from a contract standpoint. And I'm just using Turner as an example. Just about anybody that they even wanted to get in range of, you would need his $9.5 million. So that's the guy to keep an eye on, is Taylor Horton-Tucker for the Lakers, and then as well as the salary of Kendrick Nunn, though he hasn't played at all yet this season due to a bone bruise in his knee. So, but THT is the most likely piece on the Lakers to get moved. I wouldn't say it's likely he gets traded. The Lakers like him a lot, and I think he's going to be fairly polarizing around the NBA. Some teams will like him a lot. some teams might not be quite as high on him. So I don't think you're going to see consistent value around the league on him.
I will say to a couple things. Just it's that Horton Tucker Nunn combo that gets you to about 18 million or so in a matching salary in a trade. So that's kind of your upper bound there. Yeah, you could throw on one of the minimum guys who makes the 1.7 million or so, and or two of those guys. That becomes more of a roster spot issue than it is a salary match issue, because just not a lot of teams are in position to do a 3 or 4 for 1 kind of trade. And I will say this with Westbrook. This one feels a little bit to me like nothing's going to happen this year. It's just too hard to move a number that big this year. That also is a huge admission of, all right, this doesn't work. We blew it. But I think what you do, we see this all the time. The Mike Conley trade to Utah is the most famous example of this. It got really close at the trade deadline the year before he actually got moved to the Jazz, and they just couldn't get there, in part because he made $30 million and it was too hard to move that salary that big. So I do wonder if this is the Lakers, if they are, or we're going to move on from Russell Westbrook. I've said it a million times. Next year's an expiring contract becomes far more movable. And for anybody saying, well, maybe he won't opt in, let's get played in reality world for a little while versus Fantasyland.
I mean, we said the same thing with Chris Paul, but that was a fairly specific situation.
Exactly. So, and he got his money anyway.
Absolutely.
So, exactly. Now, I think what you're looking at with Russell is maybe the Lakers set the groundwork for a trade that then we see in July, where it's all right, we've got things kind of worked out here. It's just we can't do it this year, but maybe because of roster spots and all these other things. But then in July, we've kind of already found our home for him. So maybe that's where it goes with this one. But I also don't want to go too crazy because he's playing better. The team is starting to play a little bit better. So I don't even know if that's overly likely now. Is this a blip, or is it going to continue? We'll see, where this all goes. But as long as Austin Reeves isn't traded, then I think all is right in Lakers world.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, Austin Reeves is now a treasure and must be protected at all costs. So yes, I don't see Austin Reeves getting traded. But in any event, let's finish up though with, and by the way, I feel like we should mention Phoenix because they're in the mix there. Utah will get very close to getting something done now that they've got Danny Ainge. But not actually pull the trigger. Phoenix,
I can laugh at that now.
I know. Now it's okay. Now, the Suns, maybe if they do make a move, it's just something around the fringes. Their chemistry has been so strong. I don't see them making a big move. But the team I really wanted to get to was the Golden State Warriors, because you've got two guys with some value that are young, and Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody. Maybe we take the reports that they're not moving James Wiseman as true on face value, but the Warriors seem primed to be a team that could make a move that will, even though they're already one of the best teams in the Western Conference, record-wise, they are the best, they could make a move that would push them to being the clear elite team there if something like that becomes available. So that's why I think they deserve a mention.
Yeah, I think the Warriors, Suns, Jazz kind of arms race here is going to be interesting to watch play out. I think those three teams have kind of separated themselves as three of the best teams in the league, not just in their conference, but in the entire NBA. I think Utah would love to add another player if they could. Their problem is going to be, in order to do it, it's going to cost them a member of their core group. And I'm just not sure that they want to do that. Whereas, like you said, the Warriors, even if they wanted to go to Wiseman and trade him, that's $9 million of salary that you've got nothing out of right now. So you're not even losing anything to give it up. Whereas if you're the Jazz, to get to meaningful matching salary, you're going to give up a contributor. And that's kind of the problem with the Suns too. The Suns' one kind of ace in the hole is Dario Saric. You've got his contract sitting there. So yeah, I think those three teams, I'm curious. This could be one too where maybe one of these three moves a little early. Maybe we see one of those late December, early January trades where we've got our eyes on somebody. We want to get them before the other side does. That's something I've kind of got my eyes on there. I think that could be kind of interesting. Again, though, the challenges we've said, and I'm not trying to be a wet blanket, is there's just not that many sellers yet.
Right.
there will be. Well, we'll get closer to that. But this advent of the play-in has really changed the math for a lot of these teams on whether or not they want to sell. Like I use the Kings as the example there. For the Kings, in a normal year, the Kings are 12-17. If this was a regular year, they'd be all right. The West is down a little, but 2.5 out of the eighth seed. Now that we've got the play-in, I think the Kings they've got to almost take the approach of let's try to get into the play-in. Let's not be content to just sit back and be one of these teams that's definitely in the lottery. Let's try to get into the play-in and really try to do something there. So I think that becomes a thing where if you're the Kings, that's the hope you can sell to your fans. And you don't want to turn around and trade, say, Harrison Barnes, key rotation player, because, well, hey, but we got these draft picks or this kid who's going to help us, 2 years down the line. Because I think Kings fans are like, we've been 2 years down the line for, a decade and a half. We've got to get some positive momentum. So that's where I just think things have changed a little bit, because like the Pacers a little different story in the East. We know what's going on there, but like the Knicks, good example, right? Normally they'd be a team you'd start to look and say, yeah, if this slide continues, they're probably out of it. But I don't know that they can slide enough to fall more than a handful of games out of the play-in tournament by the time you get there. And I think there are teams that are looking at it and saying, hey, we went in the play-in, we get into that and then get in as the 7th or 8th seed. We feel pretty good about our shot, moving forward. So that's just the math has changed a little bit, but we'll get a couple more sellers added in there.
Agreed. Yeah. Like if we were talking, Kings, like the first name that popped into my head was the Warriors, Suns, Jazz. One of those teams should make a move for Harrison Barnes to try to go add that piece. But again, if the Kings aren't selling, if they're not in seller's mindset, then that changes things. Right now, I see 6 teams that are very clearly at this point in the season should be in sell mode. And that's the Pacers, the Magic, the Pistons, the Rockets, the Pelicans, and the Thunder. Those 3 teams are in each conference should be in seller mode. Everybody else can at least talk themselves into, hey, we could be a play-in tournament team. But as we get closer to February, that may very well change, and it will. As we get closer to February, things will settle a bit more, and we'll have a better sense of who's truly out of it.
And I think you have different approaches to that too. If you're Portland, you better not be content with just fighting for the play-in, because if you are, you've made a major mistake. If you're still sitting towards the bottom there, no, you gotta sell. You gotta start moving some pieces and tell Damian Lillard, hey, remember how the Warriors fell out for a year or two? Like, we may fall out, but we'll get back, with this. So yeah, I think you have to look at that. If you're them, if you're the Raptors, I think Masai Ujiri is smart enough to know, like, let's not we don't need to push the 10th seed in the play-in. If it's better for us to fall back a little and move, Pascal Siakam if we could or something like that, that may be the direction to go.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap things up. Everybody, longer episode than usual today, but you know what happens once we start talking trade. Please let us know in the comments down below your thoughts. Is there somebody that we forgot to put in there or didn't put in that you think is going to be moved? Let us know your thoughts on this situation. If you're, again, watching the YouTube version of this, don't forget, subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications as well. To listen to the podcast version, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, and certainly give us that rating and review as well. Till next time, everybody.
I will say this. Oh, yeah. Give me 1 second. I will say this real quick. It is just about to turn 12 noon Eastern. So you can thank Trevor and I for whatever happens in the next 15 to 20 minutes, because that's how it goes. We hang up, we say our goodbyes, and then news breaks, usually just as I'm about to start eating lunch or something like that.
Yesterday it was the Danny Ainge thing, so who knows what it's going to be today.
Now, we'll say it's not that we haven't realized, like, well, maybe we should go a little later.
It doesn't matter.
No, what we've realized is it doesn't matter. Yeah. Whatever time we stop recording, within 15 minutes after, some news comes out.
So big news coming in T-minus 15 minutes from right now. So 12:15 Eastern time, guys. Get ready. Some sort of big news is coming. All right. Thanks, everybody. Till next time. See ya and stay